Dimitris Konstantakapoulos is a journalist and writer specialized in international policy. He's the author of several books on the Eastern Mediterranean, its geopolitics, including that affecting Cyprus. He has worked at the office of the Greek Prime Minister Andreas Papandreou on East-West relations and arms control from 85 to 88, and as the chief correspondent, and he has been a member of the Secretariat of the Central Committee of Syriza, which he quit in 2015. Today, he is the coordinator of the Delphi Initiative, which is a news press which you can find at www.defenddemocracy.press. So, Dimitrios, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Radhika. Good morning and good evening to everybody. I am afraid that my internet connection here is a little bit disturbed because I'm in a small Aegean island and things are somehow difficult. If my connection is cut, I will cut at least my image so you can hear me. So, first of all, I want to say the following one. The reactions we have seen to Russian military intervention in Ukraine since six months now are quite informative about what is happening with democracy, I would say, in the West itself. Because we have seen for the first time since the Roma, for example, and the persecution of the Romans and of the Jews, a general racist persecution of everything Russian, including great Russian composers and writers, which is rather ridiculous. We have seen a wave of neo-McCarthyism in the whole West. And so that makes into doubt the arguments of the West that this is a struggle between democracy and autocracy. And to be more precise about this argument, we have seen what kind of democracy destroyed at least half a dozen countries. We have seen also what would mean a victory of the West over Russia. We have seen this during the 90s. I think you all remember that Boris Yeltsin, in order to proceed with the entering of the capitalist relations of production and distribution and the looting of the Soviet public property in Russia, with the whole support and the encouragement of the United States, he bombed Parliament in October 1993. This is the kind of democracy that the West means to impose on Russia, and we see it in Ukraine, where all opposition parties are forbidden and where a very authoritarian regime has been established. And there is a question. Why, for example, such moral outrage about Russia's intervention in Ukraine? We did not see anything like that when, for example, NATO, with France in its forefront, has intervened, has destroyed one of the more prosperous and progressive African and Middle Eastern countries, Libya. We have not seen any moral outrage in half a dozen such interventions in the whole of the Middle East and in Yugoslavia. We have not seen also such outrage when the European Union and the IMF intervened and destroyed with economic means one member of the European Union and NATO, that is my country, Greece. If they impose such a regime inside their own ranks, one can imagine what would happen if they would win over Russia in what amounts to a sui generis world war. Sui generis because there is not a frontal clash between the two camps, but in all other aspects, it's really a world war. Now, I don't know if this was a mistaken response of Russia or not. Maybe it was, maybe it was not. This is irrelevant to our discussion. And in reality, the crisis in Ukraine began in 2014. And I did not see any reaction to the fact that a war is continuing in Donbass for 7 years now. And some people also criticize the Russian leadership not for intervening, but for not intervening earlier, when it could solve the problem much easier. So if you look to this conflict, you can see three, so to say, conflicts, the one hidden into the other, like the Russian matryoshkas. The core conflict is Donbass conflict. And I must say at this point that we consider Ukraine and Russia as two separate countries. As a matter of fact, they have been for a long time part of the same country. There is an aspect of civil war in what is happening now in Ukraine. And the Soviet Union was dissolved in dubious circumstances of dubious legitimacy, and even the frontiers of those countries were drawn without taking into account the right of nations to self-determination, because both Donbass and Crimea are inhabited by a clear Russian majority, Russian ethnic majority. So why they had to adhere to Ukraine? Nobody asked their citizens. Anyway, their citizens accepted this fact, and Russia accepted this fact until 2014, when they saw a coup d'etat in Kiev threatening them directly, not only their national rights. They understood that this was also a social offensive. The revolt of the Donbass inhabitants was also a social one. They kicked out their oligarchs, and they tried to run themselves to their region and their economies. And this is unfortunately a badly known aspect of the things in the West. Even if you consider that Russia is aggressive against Ukraine, there is another problem, that there is a much bigger threat against Russia from NATO itself. And this is, we have enough elements. I don't think it is necessary to repeat that. Now in this discussion, that NATO has promised not to extend. It is extending all the time. Now it wants to go to the Pacific Ocean, and only a stupid person can, or a dishonest person can buy the argument that it is doing this for defensive reasons. So Russia has suffered 13 or maybe more invasions from the West through Belarus and Ukraine in the last 3 centuries, including Napoleon's war against it and Hitler's war against it. I think it would be foolish for a Russian general not to take this into account. We can, of course, say whatever we want from far away, but this is the reality of the situation. Now, some people say that after all, the left has not to choose between 2 imperialisms. But this is a wrong comparison with the First World War, because there we had really the advanced capitalist countries, the imperialist countries, were divided into 2 blocks. Now what we have is that the West, we have the phenomenon of a kind of hyper-imperialism, like super-imperialism, like Karl Kautsky has proposed, but at the time he proposed it, his idea did not come true. Now it is coming true. We have the so-called collective West, which has, first of all, it has disciplined all its states, and even states which were neutral and opposed to the American policy, like France and Sweden, and they are all together against Russia. And they want what they want. They tell us what they want by their words and their actions. They want a regime change in Russia. And now I may ask the question, irrespective of what is going on in Ukraine, is it the interest of Russians and Ukrainians to see a regime change in Russia, the dissolution of the Russian Federation into small parts, as Brzezinski has proposed in his famous book, and a further isolation of China, and then the repetition of the same scenario in China, or with a great war against Iran in the Middle East, because those which will be is going to win, which I doubt very much, by the way, it will be a global disaster, a disaster for the Ukrainian people, a disaster for the Russian people, and a disaster for the whole of humanity. This is why the left cannot endorse this war. Not because it likes invasions or military interventions, which are anyway, they are happening much more often on the initiative of Western countries. See any moral outrage, even from the West, as I told you before, when they intervened in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, etc. 2 months ago, Afghanistan is a country which is threatened by decided to confiscate what this country has, the small means it has in Western banks, as a reparation for the victims of September 11th. This is the Western humanism, which is anyway, we know it for 500 years. There is no reason to pretend that there is such a thing. Now, I'm afraid that the Western left has known a moment of bankruptcy up to now. And if the situation is continuing, it will be very dangerous. Because, listen, even if we dismiss all the Russian arguments, arming Ukraine and trying to overthrow the Russian regime means 3 things. First, we run the risk of a nuclear war by accident, by miscalculation, or by provocation. When I mean provocation, when I say provocation, I mean that there is an extremist nucleus inside the Western establishment. In my opinion, but of course there is no proof of that, if the COVID was leaked by an American biotechnology laboratory, as Jeffrey Sachs, not any strange person, is claiming, then this has been, but if it was done in purpose, it has been the work of a Black International working inside the Western system as a fraction which is going to world war and to chaos worldwide. So there are such forces in the West, and we must not dismiss them. I don't know what is happening in Russia and in China, but I cannot exclude that they will at some time appear there, because the competition is sometimes making the two competing forces similar. So even when the left says no to the war, but it begins explaining how the Putin's regime is criminal and barbarian, and what is Bush's regime, what is Trump's regime, what is Nicolas Sarkozy's regime, then we have to treat all of them criminal and barbarians. Or we have to be more political. In fact, I'm afraid that the left, a part of the left is siding with its own imperialism, as it has done many times in the past, and another part is just afraid of spelling things out. The second consequence of the continuation of this world war, sui generis world war, is that we lose every hope of stopping climate change. This is the new fact which we don't take into account, the new factor which we don't take into account. We believe that our world will last forever. We are waging struggles to share its resources, to dominate, things like that. But this world cannot exist for much longer. I mean, the humanity the world will make unsustainable the continuation of human life. We must stop climate crisis. But to stop climate crisis, first of all, we need to have a climate of international cooperation.
Dimitris, if I may request you to wrap up, please.
Yes, I will make a synthesis. So we see even now, as a result of the war and the sanctions and the counter-sanctions, we see European states making many steps backwards towards in the climatic change thing by importing LNG, by accelerating fossil fuel researches, etc. The third thing is that the continuation of this war is a threat to what has left of democratic atmosphere in our own countries, in the Western countries, I mean. And some people, now we see the crisis already happening in 4 European countries, and we will see much more coming in the next months. So some people are joyful about this because they see that the West is going to be defeated, etc. The West is not going to be defeated automatically. I mean, and here the role of the left is crucial. We see in Sri Lanka, for example. In Sri Lanka, there was a revolt, there was a crisis, there was a revolt, but the result was rather a more pro-American, pro-IMF administration. So for the left, for the Western left, it is a very critical moment. If it does not want that this crisis leads to the rise of far-right forces and neo-fascist forces in Europe and in the United States, it has to appear. And in order to appear, it has, first of all, to have a concrete policy on Ukraine. And this concrete policy has to include, in my opinion, 4 points. The one is to call, of course, for a ceasefire and negotiations, to call also for the lifting of sanctions, which are harming, by the way, more Western Europe than Russia itself, and to the arming of the Ukraine. So we have a freezing of the situation and to try to find a solution, a solution outside the war scenarios. There is no, in my opinion, other possible alternative. And if the left does not find the courage to do it in the West, then there will be no left and no democracy, and it will be very dangerous for the whole world, because the West, and this is the difference with the Second World War, there is no possibility of winning a world war for any of the camps. A world war in the present conditions will mean the destruction of the whole of humanity. We have signed, and Radica also signed, an international appeal to stop the war and lift the sanctions immediately. I will put it to you through the chat function, because I don't know how to share my screen. And we invite all of you, if you wish to sign it, it is remaining open to signature. Thank you very much.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.